Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on building an educational portal with Kontent.ai. I'm Radka Uhlířová, a product marketing manager at Kontent.ai, and I would like to introduce Tom Nosek to you. Tom is a director of customer enablement at Kontent.ai, and he's going to talk about how we've built our own educational portal using Kontent.ai. Tom has been in the customer education area for 9 years, and he's been overseeing Kontent.ai's enablement from the beginning. Hi, Tom.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are going to discuss why we chose the Kontent.ai headless CMS for educational content and how it enabled us to create our current version of the Learn portal. Then, we'll dive into 2 configuration showcases. One will be about building the portal navigation and working with Web Spotlight, and the other will explain how we configured separate content for different audiences, such as customers, partners, and employees. Finally, the discussion will be followed by the Q&A session, so please drop your questions and comments in the chat anytime, and we'll get to them after the presentation. So, let's jump right into it. Tom, you've been building our own educational portal with Kontent.ai headless CMS. Wouldn't a single-purpose system for education be better for such content?
Well, the answer isn't that straightforward. In different situations, I can imagine different solutions. For example, during the first years of Kontent.ai, we used single-purpose systems ourselves to cover educational needs. And by those single-purpose systems, I mean systems like developer documentation tool for developer tutorials and API references, or a learning management system and relevant authoring tools for e-learning content. However, as our requirements expanded over time, we had more types of content, which meant more systems. And when you have an educational program, you typically need more than one type of information. For example, we were offering written tutorials for both business and technical audiences, API references, certification tests, or e-learning courses. And this cost more maintenance and scattered focus among them. So we decided to merge all of our activities to our headless CMS.
How does headless CMS help with the content that was managed across multiple tools?
With single-purpose systems for all of our scenarios, we couldn't get to less than 3 systems, and that's us. Kontent.ai isn't one of the largest companies in the world, so a company in the Fortune 500 will likely bring a whole new level of systems that must somehow collaborate together. In the end, all systems work differently, and to make them work and look similar, you need the development power anyway. The headless concept enabled us to minimize this to just one system. But that's just one part of the equation. Headless CMSs are also versatile, and this brings complexity. If we look at them just as replacements for single-purpose tools in their single-purpose scenario, they'll likely not win the comparison. To replace a specialized API reference, for example, with a headless CMS, without any further plans, that can only be a good idea with very specific requirements. Headless CMSs are the kings elsewhere. We are thinking about how we can bring all the content within our organization together and invite others to participate in content creation. And with headless CMSs, all content should eventually be within this CMS because it serves as a content repository for everyone in the organization. And this is what we can break down silos and help information flow within a company. And with such a goal in mind, single-purpose systems just lost right away.
But how does the Kontent.ai headless CMS help you meet educational requirements?
Well, from the education perspective, the headless CMS gives us natively advanced features often missed in educational software. That's, for example, content reuse, easy link management, easy setup of search across the whole content base, content versioning. It can be also smooth collaboration, easy publishing process, or front end completely in our hands. And Kontent.ai also brings in user-friendly authoring and taxonomy management. And many tools for creating documentation or e-learning don't have content versioning, or you need to republish the whole content base to do a small adjustment. and some can't reuse content. Just the examples are different with each system. And while the single-purpose systems bring predefined features for education purposes, the functionality for content authoring is often lacking compared to content management systems that have content creation as one of the primary focuses. Headless then adds another custom presentation layer, so we're able to set completely what the user experience is like for our users.
How do you proceed with the goal of merging content and collaborative authoring within the company?
We're implementing our goals step by step, iteratively. We realize that even though we are the vendor ourselves, the technical limits are beyond our horizons of our educational business goals. So whenever we think we are coming closer to our goals, we find out that the technical side of things enables us to achieve more goals, just with small improvements. And just over this summer, we released a new version of our Learn portal, which you can find at Kontent.ai/learn. And by the time, we had already invited more contributors to our materials, and we had already written e-learning courses and API references in Kontent.ai, which is still not something common these days. But still, we wanted more and to rethink how education should feel for learners. Make learning an experience, not a boring necessity that what it usually is in corporate education. We know that we still have a long way to go to fulfill the whole vision, but for us, this summer release was like a giant leap forward when it comes to education.
So what does the new Learn portal bring to our learners?
We were thinking about how most companies split their education by medium, and that was the initial trigger. And you can see a help center, and there's documentation, and here's e-learning. And once you are in one of these sections, only then you can see what you can do and learn there. And if you come to one of them from Google, you likely never find out about the other. But if you're a learner, whether you're solving a problem or want to learn something proactively, you typically don't care in which medium your answer is. You want to get to the topic as quickly as possible without any complications. So if there's a situation when the medium matters, it's more in the role of metadata. For example, you're proactively learning and you want to watch a video. Even in this case, you likely go after a topic you're interested in, or will you rather watch a video that isn't relevant to what you do and need? So we decided that we wanted to change our navigation. We used to have the main navigation of tutorials, API reference, and e-learning, and now the main navigation consists of individual stages when working with Kontent.ai. This way, you can jump to the section you're interested in right away. We also merged tutorials and e-learning, so now we just call everything a learning path with lessons. Anyone can visit any lesson, but your progress is tracked. So if you decide to have your learning official, like if you want to have a certificate or just show within the company records that you passed onboarding, you won't start from scratch again.
Has something changed from the authoring or technical point of view?
From our authoring point of view, things are much simpler. We used SCORM as the standard for moving content from Kontent.ai to our LMS. And let's just say that the 21st century deserves a better standard. SCORM just creates like one big package of information and its design, and then you have to usually somehow send it to your LMS and either stream it or upload it separately, manually, and it's always a separate experience. We right now are working with typical articles, while user tracking is done directly with our front-end app with, let's say, experience API-like events. And moreover, since the content isn't split into separate media, it's clearer for authors as well to find relevant content because they don't have to check at that many places.
So why do you think we don't see a bigger technical revolution within education?
Yeah, unfortunately, education teams are typically underfunded, so they don't have the time and resources to do costly technological revamp. Everyone keeps saying that education is the backbone of the future, but education generally suffers for both children and adults in a lot of places. We have to treasure when education is valued, so it can be done well. But not just to blame the companies that don't want to give out more money to education. It's also our duty as educators to gather some data behind our efforts to show that what we do actually matters.
If you don't use SCORM anymore, how do you build the learning features?
We built what we need custom on top of our headless CMS. At this moment, there's no learning management system or LMS that could work with headless CMS content, at least that I know of. Luckily, we don't need to deal with selling and assigning courses because the access works via our product subscriptions, and we share the credentials with our product as well. So our learners don't need to register or remember and create just another set of credentials. This way, we can only focus on the educational features, how to make the learning interesting, and our backlog is still really long about what we want. So it's always about prioritization. We're continuously improving the portal. Some features can be done quickly, and some other needs more time to plan.
Why haven't you used one of the headless LMSs?
Headless LMSs are actually a great step toward personalized training, I think, and we gladly use them. However, they still require the content to be created within their LMSs, at least as of now. This defeats the single sourcing purpose. So one of the major requirements for us was to single source content with one user-friendly authoring experience. And Kontent.ai can do that, but headless LMSs, how they work right now, they cannot. So I believe the future of LMSs is one step above headless LMSs, where they work more like feature-rich learning layer platform that takes content via API from headless CMS and enables all the data gathering, evaluation, certificate creation, and so on, while the front-end app sends all the tracking info into it. So you'll have a triangle of headless CMS, headless LMS, and a front-end app. However, this doesn't exist right now, so we'll have to wait for such a service.
How did you configure your project in Kontent.ai?
If we were to describe the whole solution, we might be here for hours or even days, especially if we looked into it from multiple angles. So I picked two interesting use cases that showcase how we made some of the decisions along the way. The first is about how it's about our choices for navigation, and in the end, how we use both Web Spotlight and Content Inventory for authoring. Let me take you to our application. In most situations, we want to be in control of the order as the order makes semantic sense. For example, if we look at the model section, it consists of paths that are ordered intentionally in a way that the Yonter overview article is first, the intro path is second, and so on. Similarly, in a specific learning path, the articles follow each other. So as authors, we need to be on top of what's where exactly. That's where Web Spotlight shines. With the tree, you have an immediately clear overview of what your sitemap looks like. It also gives a better understanding to our external contributors who can follow the structure of the portal to find out what they're looking for. Now, from the modeling perspective, it's a standard Web Spotlight implementation with so-called navigation bound to content. That means the page within the tree holds the content itself. This setup isn't aligned with the omnichannel best practices because you then combine web-specific data with semantic content, but we don't have ambitions in the foreseeable future to introduce other channels than our web, so we prioritize simplicity. In our typical best practices, we typically advise using navigation separate from content, which means that pages are basically wrappers or placeholders that hold all the web-relevant information, such as the URL slug or search engine metadata, and link a content item with the actual content. On the other hand, we have types of content where we necessarily don't need to be in control of the exact order. Let's look into our product updates. For example, Here we still need to be in control of the content itself, but the actual order is chronological. The possibility of moving individual product updates in a web spotlight tree could actually represent a threat of someone accidentally messing up the strictly chronological system. And it's the same with our terminology list. The only difference here is that the list is alphabetical. So the business requirements is that we, authors, create the content, but once published, it magically appears where it should. And that's something we do not link anywhere. And in both cases, we create a content item and of a specific content type, so either a product update or a term. And once we publish it, it's then displayed according to the roles we specified to our developers. And this way, no one has to think twice when adding a new product update or term, or where to edit or how to edit. And if someone comes and doesn't know the process, we always describe it at the beginning of the item in a guidelines element. Now, the trick is to know where these lists should appear. I think there are multiple ways to do it. We currently have content types named list of product updates and list of term definitions. And wherever we place a component of this type, it will render the list there. This way we don't have to hardcode any URLs that are reserved for product updates or terms, and the power still lies in the content team. I can also imagine, for example, having one content type for this all and selecting the target content items for rendering with checkboxes or taxonomy, as for example I'm showing right now on some sort of sample. I can imagine another option where this could be a custom element which would dynamically list all the content types in case, for example, if we want to activate this functionality for the whole content type list. So when I'm a creator and want to write an article, I'll likely go to Web Spotlight, find the right location and create it. If I want to create a term definition or a product update, I'll just go to the content inventory and create a new item from there. Both approaches fit a different scenario.
You mentioned that as a creator, you can create different types of content. But how do you control who can author which content?
We wanted to have as transparent approach as possible while keeping our content secure. In Kontent.ai, there are basically 4 ways to restrict content creation. You can use roles, workflow steps, collections, and languages. As we only author content in English, we don't really use languages, but we use the rest of the options. So let's look again into our project. Let's start with collections, as they're backbone of our permission model. Our collections label content based on the access rights and optionally also the type of information. The basic division is between public, partner, and internal content, because those are the 3 main access levels that we have in our portal. But in some cases, that's not enough. For example, for the developer certification questions, we want to be more in control of who can access and edit it. That's why we have the public certifications collection, so that we can be on top of that. Let's now look into workflow steps. We have 2 workflows defined. One is called reviewed content, and the other is unreviewed content. As our stance is to be as transparent as possible, we're okay if relevant groups can update and publish some content items without direct engagement from the education team or the respective owner of the area. This is set per collection. So, for example, all content items in the internal collection are unreviewed content, while all content items in the public certifications collection are reviewed content. The difference between the workflow is that the reviewed content has one more step. The step is called review and ensures that the content can't be published unless you can move content from review to published, which is a permission dedicated to only certain roles. And that's where we'll look next. In order from the least to the most permissions, we have readers, editors, creators, reviewers, and the default project managers. By default, everyone in our company can be a reader everywhere. Editors cannot create new content, but can edit existing content and publish it if it has the unreviewed content workflow assigned at least. Creators can also create new content, which is, by the way, the most used permission that we have here. And reviewers can, above that, publish also content in the reviewed content workflow. For example, our partner managers must approve and publish content in their partner collection so that they're aware of what's updated for them. So this way they are on top of what's being released. And finally, the default project managers are reserved for the owners of the project from the education and technical teams. And finally, when we look into an individual user, they'll have a different role assigned to different collections. And if we were using multiple languages as well, this would just make this setting a bit more complex. And this is valid for content items and since recently also for assets.
How do you set up which learners can see what sections or articles? Do you use collections for this use case as you do for internal permissions?
From the beginning of our educational materials, we wanted our learners to have an easiest path to education. So we connected the sign-in with the product itself, and the access rights are automatic based on the subscriptions each user has assigned to. This way, no one needs to save or remember additional credentials and go through another sign-up, and no one needs to ask their superiors for money for a specific course. We want our users and learners to succeed, so we believe we should do the most to enable that. Now, you can use collections for setting up public access rights. In the end, Delivery API returns this information. However, we wanted to split internal and external permissions because they might not be one-to-one. Even in our situation, we'd need to check the beginning of the code name to differentiate whether it's public, partner, or internal content, because we have more collections with these prefixes. And if developers don't like something, it's parsing strings because it's prone to errors, and who can disagree with that? So in our situation, we use a taxonomy available at each step of the navigation. Our front-end app then takes this data to decide whether the user is eligible to see the page. This setting is also inherited, so if a parent item of the one I'm currently editing has access limited to partners only, and I'll leave public here, it will still be accessible to partners. I can only restrict it more, so if I set it to be restricted for employees only, it will become internal. Since our navigation is pretty straightforward and we don't have thousands and thousands of different sections and items, we left it like this. But I can imagine that for large organizations, we'd have a simple custom element here that would resolve restrictions of the items above in the hierarchy and also warn me if what happens for items below in the hierarchy. And while that's a relatively small improvement for technical people, it can be a lifesaver for creators in larger companies. In the end, we think the configuration of access, but also other parts of Kontent.ai, should follow some sort of strategy. So before we set our access levels, both the public and the internal ones, we listed what our requirements were and how we imagined the flow would work.
Thank you, Tom. Now we're going to continue with questions and answers. We would also like to share the key takeaways with you.